Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. IMSA Battle at the Bricks. Midweek drama turned to a huge success Sunday. We'll discuss and recap that race. Lando Norris claims a dominant win as Singapore shows the full potential of McLaren and his potential hope for a championship. Kyle Larson, another short track, another dominant win. Plus week 25 to the grid ranking with MotoGP Joe Samaniego here, along with Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight. A big thank you to our Patreon investors calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in us each and every month. You too can invest in the Grid Network. Link in the video description to our Patreon. We also accept Buy Me a Coffee and YouTube Super Chats. We see it on the air. We'll thank you on the air. Simple way, of course, to support us. Subscribe. Hit the bell icon. Kobe, let's get started with IMSA. During a week where for Rahal Letterman Lanigan, you had the FBI show up at your headquarters in Zionville, Indiana. The sports car racing program showed up big time at the iconic Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the penultimate race of the 2024 IMSA WeatherTech Sports Cars Championship. BMW M Team Rahal Letterman Lanigan set the drama off the stage, off the track, and finished 1-2 in the Battle of the Bricks 6-hour Michelin Endurance Cup race. The second win for BMW GTP program, and the first win on track after their first win at Watkins Glen last year. That was after a Penske Porsche was disqualified. The number 24, Philip Eng, Jesse Krohn. They're going to get to kiss the bricks, a tradition that we all know started with Dale Jarrett. It has evolved to now anytime you win there, you want to kiss those bricks. A history those bricks could tell. Their sister car, the number 25, second place, Connor De Felipe and Nick Ioli. What an awesome effort for them. But Sports Car 365 is reporting that IMSA is impounding 7 of the 11 GTP cars for further technical inspection, including the race win in 24. The number 6 Porsche, number 85 Porsche, number 40 Acura, number 5 Porsche, the number 01 Cadillac, and the number 63 Lamborghini. Given the situation at the team shop earlier for Rahal Letterman Lanigan, how big is this win for the morale of everyone at Rahal Letterman Lanigan?
I think it's huge, Joe, especially after what we reported on the breaking news on Grid Tonight with the FBI showing up to the Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing headquarters. And still right now, we don't know enough about this situation to really talk about it in detail. So we're still going to be waiting for, more information to come out on that current investigation. But the point still stands: when the FBI shows up to your place, that's never a good sign at all of where things could be heading. But for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, after what happened earlier this week, and then just a few days later to kiss the bricks, it's like you're at a low on Wednesday, and then Sunday, the highs of the highs. It doesn't matter whether you whether you win a sports car race, a stock car race, whatever, on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. As long as you get to win that Indy, that is extremely special, and I'm sure this RLL BMW team is going to be extremely happy, going into the final race at Motul Petit Le Mans. But, just looking at the season as a whole, Joe, not just what happened this week with the FBI showing up, RLL, this BMW program this year in IMSA, it's safe to say they had quite a tough year. A lot of inconsistencies, not getting the finishes where you probably think they would deserve. The team has just not been performing well throughout this 2024 season. But to get a 1-2 finish today, and we were all wondering if they were going to be able to make it to the end because they were running very low on energy, and thankfully they were able to save enough and see the checkered flag to get this really big finish in both cars come across the line in first and second place on the overall podium. So I think, not just what happened on Wednesday, but if you go all the way back, starting at the Rolex 24 in January, been a tough year, and to get a 1-2, it definitely has to give them a lot of momentum heading into the final race of the season. And who knows what's going to happen next year, because I know there have been a lot of rumors that there could be some changes within the driver lineup in 2025 on this BMW GTP program. So I think a lot of people could be racing for their jobs right now.
A lot up in the air for Rahal Letterman Lanigan, not just in sports car, but that IndyCar program, nothing going good. So this has to be a huge morale boost for Monday. I have a follow-up question, Cody, because I mentioned about the Sports Cars 365. So many cars from GTP going to be a further inspection, considering we don't cover IMSA too much, especially on the top of the show. So for viewers unfamiliar, is impounding is IMSA impounding 7 out of the 11 GTP cars a routine procedure, or is this something that may have some teams nervous?
To be honest, Joe, I've never seen so many cars impounded like this. Yeah, usually after these IMSA races, that is that, and we move on to the next race. And you may hear, some cars fell in post race inspection. I believe I saw a VIR. I believe the harder race and Aston Martin and GTD end up losing their finish. I believe they lost a podium at that race, if I'm not mistaken, because fell in post race inspection. So, and you already mentioned, Joe, last year BMW inherited their very first win in IMSA's GTP class because one of the Penske Porsches ended up failing post-race inspection. So it's not uncommon to see teams in IMSA fail in post-race inspection, but to see 7 out of the 11 GTP cars, have to go through this, I guess you want to call it further technical inspection and teardown procedures. Yeah, it's definitely something that's very, very surprising. I guess you can definitely say that IMSA's taken, the rule book very seriously, and they want to make sure that all of the teams are following the rules, to the fullest extent. And maybe this is just something where they want to show that they're serious, about checking for things. Maybe they'll find nothing. But yeah, when you have 7 out of 11 of these cars that are going to be going through further teardown and inspection, it does make you wonder, like what's going on here. Hopefully it's nothing serious, but we'll just have to wait and see there. But one of the most concerning things is, you mentioned the race winning number 24 BMW, is one of the prototypes that's going back. So I'm sure they're going to keep their fingers crossed, that they're going to be able to keep this win and all of that, because failing post race, especially after winning like this, would not be a great thing. But as after we looked at the list, the number 25 BMW is not listed there. So if for some reason the number 24 BMW lost this race win, they would still be able to keep it. They would just go to the sister car. But yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of this situation. I've never seen so many leading prototypes have to go through this further teardown.
It'll be really interesting to see if there's anything drastic that change. I know if for some reason there's some drastic changes, Grid Tonight, they'll definitely be covering it. Of course, now we'll be back for the Grid Endurance Performance Index. And now entering this race weekend for the endurance race at the Indianapolis Road Course, many expected Chip Ganassi racing the number 01 Cadillac, both Penske Porsches Motorsports entries to be the favorites to win. We saw the 01 Sebastien Bourdais put on pole, the number 6. Porsche took the final spot on the overall podium behind the 2 Rahal Letterman Lanigan BMWs. But that number 01, the number 7, they ran into trouble. It seemed like Ganassi Cadillac were going to be in the hunt for the win, but a punctured tire took them out of contention. Then the championship leading number 7 Porsche came to a complete stop on the front stretch and just sat there, lost 7 laps. Tough break. Now with one race to go, Philippe Nasser and Dane Cameron lead the GTB championship stands by 14 points over teammate Nick Tandy, Matthew Jaminet, setting up a winner-take-all season finale, a Moto Petit Le Mans between the 2 Porsche Penske Motorsports prototypes. Kobe, when it comes to those 2, which Porsche entering Petit Le Mans do you believe is a championship favorite?
Oh wow, it's really hard to choose a championship favorite. I think both the number 6 and number 7 Porsches are probably equally matched heading into this season finale. But at the end of the day, I think it may come down to who they're gonna pick as their third driver, their endurance driver for this event. Yeah, I know Porsche has a lot of great factory drivers right now in the World Endurance Championship, and I'm sure they're gonna draft they're obviously gonna draft one of those guys in, or I wonder, are they going to put Joseph Newgarden in one of these Porsche seats? I think he'd be a good proven talent to put in the car. But I wonder if Team Penske and Porsche would rather put one of their factory pilots in the seat. It's going to be interesting to see what Penske decides to do. It's going to be a crucial decision for the organization to see who's going to try to help the 6 and the 7 team take it home and win the title. And it's still weird going into Petit Le Mans, talking about 2 Penske Porsches, in the mix for the championship, because it seemed like the last handful of years we've gotten used to seeing Wayne Taylor racing and Action Express racing, being the 2 title front runners. But this time around, it's the number 6 and the number 7. But if I had to pick one of them, I'd probably go with the number 7, Felipe Nasr and Dane Cameron, but don't count out Nick Tandy and Matthew Jominy. I think they're coming in hot. They have a lot of momentum. The number 7 didn't have a good day today, and because they didn't have a good day, as we saw, their championship lead got slashed by a lot. Yeah, and the number 7 can't afford to have another bad day, because if they have a bad day at Petit Le Mans, they're going to lose the championship, and then the number 6 will be ready to pounce. But yeah, looking forward to seeing what Petit Le Mans brings. Already looking like an exciting championship battle between both of the Penske prototypes. Yeah, and looking forward to seeing no team orders, because that would not make sense in this situation, and we can just see both cars, just race it out for the championship.
Equal equipment, teammates, but on the track, they're going to be fighting each other for that championship. It's going to be really interesting to see. Switching back to the race. Early in the race, Kobe, we saw some heavy rain, put the race under full course caution for nearly an hour. However, when we saw some racing in their wet conditions, big surprise to the number 63 Lamborghini all the way to the front. Roman Grosjean put the Iron Links in a good position, but then the team ran into trouble after broken suspension. Fortunately, ended their day after they hit a GTD car. It's been a tough season for Lamborghini. Their prototype program, both IMSA and WEC, World Endurance Championship, and it just hasn't been that great of a year. Today's strong run, though, in the rain, was that a glimpse of things to come in the future for the Lamborghini prototype program?
Yeah, definitely. I thought Lamborghini had a decent race today, up until the incidents that end up, having the race come undone from them. Yeah. When we saw the rain come into play, the Lamborghini really turned on. And it's weird because some of the prototypes in the dry, they're not as great, but when it comes to the wet, some of the prototypes run much better. It seemed like the Lamborghini definitely takes to the wet really well. And I think that played a big role in seeing them come up through the front. But still, regardless whether it's wet or dry, it's a good sign for Lamborghini, because, they're running full time in the World Endurance Championship, and they're only running the endurance races in IMSA. And for them to show that potential, that definitely has to make them feel good heading into next season, because I'm sure they're working very hard to improve their prototype so they can be a lot more competitive in 2025. But yeah, they were up front during the early parts of the race. They're looking good. But unfortunately, they came down pit road, had some issues there. I believe they got a drive-through penalty for having like too many crew members, over the wall working on the cars. So, that set them back. And then I don't think Grosjean was behind the wheel during this. I think it might have been one of his teammates. Maybe it was Matteo Caroli. You have to correct me on that if I'm wrong. Yeah, that's when they ran into issue, hit the GTD car, bent the suspension. I remember seeing it come into the pits. It was like completely sideways, kind of like on a stock car when you see like the toe links been bent like that. Yeah, it was just, unfortunate situation there. But despite, not getting the result they wanted, I think they have to feel really excited to see the car run as well as it did today before it ran into all those issues.
Now, looking at the other winners in other classes, number 11, TDS Racing entry of Mikael Jensen, Stephen Thomas, and Hunter McElroy won an LMP2. Number 77, AO Racing, of course, everyone knows as Rexy. Porsche took the class victory in GTD Pro with Lauren Heinrich and Michael Christensen, while the number 120 Wright Motorsports Porsche won in GTD along with Jan Halen, Elliot Skier, and Adam Alderson. The 2024 IMSA season continues on October 12th with Moto Petit Le Mans at Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta. A 10-hour endurance race to close it out. They're going to start and finish under some nighttime skies, and that race, Cody, has been a thriller the last few years. Not going to miss that. Formula One, they're hoping their last race of the year will be a thrill for the championship, but it's going to be a wait and see how this turns out.
Yeah, definitely. In the Singapore Grand Prix, once again, extended Red Bull's winless streak to 3 months. I know that's really crazy to say that Red Bull has not won a Grand Prix in 3 months. And I guess by the time we get to Circuit of the Americas next month, we might be 4 months without a Red Bull win, which is something we never thought we'd see, as, season is going to continue into the month of October. Max Verstappen came up one spot short today in second place. Lando Norris dominated in Singapore from start to finish and almost completed the Grand Slam, but Visa Cash App RB pitted Daniel Ricciardo at the end to take away the fastest lap from Norris. Joe, are you surprised by McLaren and their flawless weekend? Can they do this for the last 6 races of the 2024 season?
I would hope to see this from McLaren for the next 6 race weekend, because if we do, game on. We have a championship battle. We know because of the early success Max Verstappen has had, he could pretty much finish second place in every race to claim the championship. But if McLaren is this strong, this fast, this precise for the next 6 race weekends, they need Red Bull to have one bad race, a DNF, and that will literally cut just about half Max Verstappen's lead. So overall, when it comes to what we saw at Singapore, I do think this is McLaren showing what we're capable of doing. You had a little bit of the advantage where with this track, it was harder to pass. You didn't have the two cars, the two teammates up in the front row. But I think now, especially 6 races left into the championship, you got to say, okay, Lando does have a fighting chance. Not just because he is the number one driver we have, not just because he's number 2 in the championship, but because we as a team, we have shown at Singapore, at other tracks, we can do this. My goodness, over 20 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen. Dominated this race. A minute ahead of 4th place. This was just something where, back in 2023 when McLaren was looking like the slowest car, we would never thought this would occur. And Red Bull was the fastest. Now here we are. McLaren, if they are doing this next race weekend at Coda, then we have Mexico City. It only takes one mistake from Max Verstappen, where it is a not so great qualifying effort, contact, not score that many points. It is a championship that could still be coming down between 2 drivers at the final race. A lot of potential, but McLaren has to deliver this kind of performance for the next 6 race weekends.
Yeah, you're right. McLaren absolutely has to be flawless. Not just this weekend, thought it was, flawless weekend, but they need to be flawless for the next 6 race weekends. And they're probably going to need some help, regardless of how Lando Norris does, moving forward. Yeah, so like you say, it only takes one mistake from Max Verstappen, and then this completely goes wide open. But, not just necessarily for that. You also have to wonder about the reliability of the car as well. You could have something go wrong at any moment. You could have a suspension failure. You could have an engine that, that fails. It's just a lot of variables, that you have to think about when it comes to these races. And all it takes is, just Lando Norris getting max points this weekend and Max Verstappen just having the worst weekend ever. And then we'll have a championship fight on our hands. And to be honest, Joe, I know I've said this on previous shows, but I'm just going to keep repeating myself. I can't believe we are in this position right now. I just wonder if McLaren finally caught on, just too little, too late. But regardless, I think it's going to come down to the wire. I'm still in shock and disbelief that this is where we are right now. Red Bull, first third of the season, I thought Max Verstappen was going to run away. I honestly thought at this point of the season, Max was going to have one hand on the championship and that everybody else was basically racing for second place behind him. But looking at the situation now, it seems like McLaren, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, they have this thing figured out right now as Red Bull continues to struggle, with their car. And we already knew Singapore, was probably one of the worst tracks on the F1 schedule. So not too big of a surprise to see them not win this weekend. Lando Norris, got to give kudos to him. Flawless drive, very, very strong to win by the margin that he did. Very impressive. He basically won in the margin that we'd expect Max Verstappen to win in. But it seemed like Verstappen and Red Bull, they're really fighting hard to try to get that Red Bull car figured out. And thankfully, Max was so dominant at the beginning of the season, he might just barely end up, keeping this world championship at Red Bull because, McLaren just might run out of time. But like you said, Joe, they could Verstappen run into some issues, and then McLaren be like, all right, they're ready to pounce. Really looking forward to seeing what happens moving forward. I think we already suspected that McLaren would probably, end up ripping away the Constructors' Championship from Red Bull, which seems like a realistic possibility right now. But the Drivers' Championship, it's still probably Max is still the favorite, but who really knows what's going to happen down the stretch? Yeah, it's nice to say once again, Formula One is unpredictable, and there's no telling who's going to be the winner at the end of the day. And Joe, I mentioned Daniel Ricciardo pitting, toward the end of the race to take away that fastest lap from Lando Norris. And if Max Verstappen, for some reason, ends up winning this championship by 1 point, I hope Daniel Ricciardo gets a special Christmas gift from Max Verstappen because that could be crucial with the way things are looking right now. And speaking of Ricciardo, there have been plenty of rumors regarding his future in Formula One. Many believe that the Singapore Grand Prix was the final career race in Formula One for him before Liam Lawson replaces him next month at Circuit of the Americas for the United States Grand Prix. Ricciardo, if you haven't seen it yet, just type in Daniel Ricciardo on Twitter, on Google, YouTube, and that'll probably be one of the first things that will pop up. Yeah, he gave a very emotional post-race interview acknowledging that today could have been the end of his Formula One career. He struggled to find the right words, but he said he put his best foot forward and lamented the fact that the fairy tale ending of him returning to Red Bull didn't happen. Joe, based on how Ricciardo reacted after the race, do you believe today was his final hurrah in Formula One? And if it was his last one, how will you remember his F1 career?
It definitely looked like this was his final hurrah, his final race in Formula One. The way everyone was treating him, the way he was acting, his interview. I would be shocked if he's still back because I feel like, if he knew he was going to be back, I think he would have a little bit of a different tone. But knowing the situation he's in, where he just has not met the expectation over at VCARB, it really shows all signs that his time in F1 is done. Unfortunately, part of it being done is, really when it comes to what other teams he could go to, I don't see Daniel Ricciardo wanting to go to a team that's sort of more towards the back of the grid. And then, unfortunately, his time in McLaren, he did get that win, but it just seems like that was the only shining spot. Renault, that was a big gamble. It looked like it was going to pay off, but when the McLaren door opened, I really say you can't blame somebody from saying, hey, I'm going to switch over to McLaren. We know McLaren was not exactly a top-level team at that point, but the prestige of driving for McLaren, if they could get their act together, they could be a race-winning contending team. That just did not pan out. Overall, when it comes to his career, one of the things that's going to really stand out is his big personality. In a sport where a lot of times fans don't exactly have the access to drivers like they do in other forms of motorsports, where you have drivers where a lot of them tend to shy away when it comes to media. Just talk about the race, what the race car did, not often show raw emotion. Daniel Ricciardo did that. That big old grin he had when he arrived to the track. Look at the following he has in the United States. He loves coming to the United States. After he won with McLaren, he got to drive that old NASCAR Dale Earnhardt Chevrolet Monte Carlo at COTA doing the burnouts. That is a driver that, is having fun and bringing the fans with him. I think too often, especially in F1, we have drivers where it just almost seems like this is just a business. You go in there, you do the race, you do some interviews for F1 TV, F1 website, and then you're secluded away. You may be caught racing on iRacing or something and show a little personality, but Daniel Ricciardo had a lot of personality, and of course, Kobe, his ability for late braking, that is something where we don't see a whole lot of. We're seeing some drivers doing that here and there, but the combination of Daniel Ricciardo with his personality, his ability to late brake, and let's remember, when he joined Red Bull, he outperformed Sebastian Vettel that year. He, I think, will be remembered for quite some time for a lot of fans currently. Hopefully, we'll see him somewhere with the media, a broadcast booth, a broadcast role somewhere. It'll be really interesting to see what his future holds, or maybe another motorsport, IndyCar. He said he wants to do stock car racing in the United States. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, it's definitely been quite a whirlwind of a career for Daniel Ricciardo. And also want to mention the fact that out of all of Max Verstappen's teammates, Daniel Ricciardo is the one driver who pushed Max the most. Yeah, so I think Daniel Ricciardo, like you were saying, he definitely deserves his flowers for everything he's been able to do in his Formula One career. Like you say, one of the most iconic personalities that we've seen, in recent memory. Whenever you see Daniel Ricciardo, you rarely see him looking sad. You always see him with a smile on his face. Even when he was giving that emotional interview, you could still see him, cracking a smile. He seems like one of, the happiest people that there could be out there. But yeah, based on his body language, almost tearing up to cry, it really does seem like that he's, possibly been told that today might be his last or was his last race in Formula One because they're ready to, get Liam Lawson some seat time heading into next year. But, Yeah, yeah, I do think it's going to be his last. Unfortunately, we'll see when the official announcement, if and when the official announcement comes. But if it's not, this race, it'll probably by the end of the season that he'll be out of Formula One for good. Like you're saying, Joe, I don't really see him wanting to go to any other situation in Formula One. I think that this is probably it, and we're going to see what he's going to do with his racing career moving forward. But even if his F1 career ends, I don't think that he's going to be done in motorsports. And leading up to this weekend, I saw Daniel Ricciardo was doing some interviews in the media talking about some stuff that he liked to do in the future. Like you mentioned, Joe, he said he liked to test a NASCAR stock car potentially. Hopefully we can see him in a road course race. We'd really love to see him do that maybe in the NASCAR Cup Series, Xfinities, or even trucks. And he also said that he'd like to test a MotoGP bike because he likes that. And he also said if one of the supercars team wanted to call up and let him do a test run at Bathurst, he'd like to do that. Can you imagine getting Daniel Ricciardo competing in the Bathurst 1000 someday? That would really be huge for that event. And he also mentioned running the Bathurst 12-hour as well. Going back home to Australia. Yeah, so he definitely will have his options out there. And in regards to IndyCar, he said IndyCar still scares him. So I don't think we're going to see him running the Indianapolis 500 anytime soon. But remember, in his F1 career, Adam Limber says he have lots of respect for Daniel Ricciardo, one passionate driver. You can tell how much he loves Formula One and just the entire environment around him. It's unfortunate, if this is it for him in the sport, because he's been such a great ambassador, great personality, such a beloved driver, from all sides of the world. And I think, like we've been saying, the one thing we're going to remember from him the most is his joyous personality and and all the happiness that he had on his face showing up to the racetrack. So yeah, we'll certainly miss Daniel Ricciardo if the Singapore Grand Prix was his final one. And now getting back to the race itself, Joe, it's safe to say that this race will not be on the short list for race of the year. We saw a pit strategy used to gain position, some passes here and there, but a grueling race that didn't go as long as some of the past racing for the first time since 2011. No safety car or virtual safety car, with very little going on in this race. Some said it was obviously a super boring race. So in your opinion, what do you make of the race?
This race, I think, reminded me of a lot of what, especially F1, the early 2000s and 90s, when you had the Schumacher era with Ferrari and their domination. You start the race, they're on the front row. Michael Schumacher was going to get the win by 20, 30 seconds. Even when at times McLaren looked like they had something, no, not really. It was always going to be a Ferrari win. Considering where we were last year, where you just knew Max Verstappen led that first corner. Ben Schneider used to joke in our group chat, and Max Verstappen has won the race, even though we still just completed only one lap, not even a lap, just one corner. But too often he was right. With this race, you knew passing was going to be a challenge. Well, after what we saw last year, there was hope that the tires will make the strategy a little bit different. We had some good racing here and there. Hulkenberg able to hold off Sergio Perez. Let's give a shout out to Franco. Again, that was a great start. Red Bull had to use the undercut to get around him. If that didn't occur, we could have been talking about another points finish for Franco. What amazing effort that was for him. Lewis Hamilton, it just seemed like he didn't really have anything. Charles Leclerc, to come up through the field, he just could not get around George Russell. Just one of those deals. So I wouldn't call it really a boring race. This was just one of those races where, when you have, particularly in F1, a team that has just aced it. The setup, the qualifying, the race strategy, they're going to win, period. You don't have the craziness of so many safety cars, late restarts. And I think a lot of, especially newer fans, have gotten accustomed to you're going to have those kind of races. It's been a while since we had a safety car in F1. I think that's a good trend. We want to see races. We don't exactly want to see big crashes or controversies. We just want good, hard racing in Formula One. Overall, I think this was a solid race, I would say. Was it the most exciting one, especially to be up at 5 a.m. to watch? Not exactly. But this is Formula One. This is the kind of racing you expect. We used to be in an era where the cars, dirty air, you can't do nothing. This race is grueling. It still was grueling. The drivers were still worn out. It's just the nature of this race. I was overall impressed with what Lando Norris did. That was a huge statement. And I think at the end of the day, we could be saying potentially this was the championship moment where Lando Norris made it clear this is where his championship drive starts. But he has 6 more races to prove us that that is true.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you mentioned it was definitely, a race that was hard on the drivers. It always is coming to Singapore because, at this part of the world, this time of year, it's really hot. Yeah, basically like the middle of July for us here in the South. I looked at the temperatures over there in Singapore, basically like in the low 90s, heat index, like around 100 degrees. And, when you're in such a humid environment like that, even at night, it's still very hot there under the lights. You have to really train your body and make sure you're hydrated, and your fitness levels at a good place to be able to do these races. Yeah, so these drivers are absolutely worn out. I think the drivers did the best job that they could in this race. But yeah, sometimes you just get races like this in Formula One, where I may not want to, get up, at 5 o'clock in the morning like you were, Joe, to see this event happen. So I might, record it and watch it later. Or I may just watch a highlights package, especially when you don't really have much going on. But, not every racing has to be a barn burner, everything like that. Sometimes you just get one, that's just very mundane, straightforward, and you start the race, nothing happens, you finish the race, you go home and you get ready for the next one. But the championship battle between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris sounds like a big gap at 52 points. But here's the reality. If Lando Norris wins and Max Verstappen DNFs Dakota, it would cut that championship lead that Verstappen have nearly in half. And we also have the sprint races coming up too with additional points on the line. I know we've already said that the constructors battle is on, but the real question is now, do we have a real drivers championship battle between Norris and Verstappen?
I do believe we do have a real championship battle between those two drivers, Kobe. Because at the end of the day, a mistake from Max Verstappen will be what could really make this much closer, and Lando Norris has to be able to capitalize, get the win. The way Lando Norris is driving right now, he is capable of winning at Circuits of Americas. The McLaren team is capable of winning at Circuits of America. The two of them are capable of winning in Mexico City. Mexico City, that higher horsepower, that could be a big source of frustration for the Red Bull team. When it comes to Circuits of America, those corners, especially after the first corner, we go down the hill through the S's. You have that long straightaway in the backstretch, but I feel, again, that plays in the advantage of the McLaren team. Potentially the Ferrari team as well, too, to be up there. So this is going to be a tough road for the Red Bull team. And with all the mess currently in Red Bull, like Mara and Isha were saying yesterday, it may not feel like a crisis yet. But I feel like they have to be stressed out at the Red Bull team because I don't see them regaining the lead in the constructors. I think McLaren, who has been outscoring them and again outscored them, they're just going to wrap this up potentially before the last race when it comes to the constructors. But on the Drivers' Championship side, now is the time for Zach Brown to say, Lando Norris is our driver. He's going to get priority, Oscar. He needs our support to get this championship because this will be a huge moment for that team to say, look where we were at the start of 2023. Claiming the constructors would be a big statement that they're back. But you to get both, that'll be huge for that team, for Lando Norris, and I think also for the fans of F1. It's no doubt Formula One, especially with Drive to Survive, was growing huge. We had such a huge following when Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen entered Abu Dhabi tied for the championship. That got messy, unfortunately. Then we had this era of Max Verstappen dominance. Well, for some of us, we know that's part of the game. For some, well, it's too predictable. I may tune in less. If we have a championship come down to the last race, especially the Lando Norris fans that may have started tuning out a little bit, they could come back into ones that just in general, oh, I haven't seen F1 in a while. You're telling me McLaren has a shot at doing this? I want to tune in. This is good for the sport, for the entirety of the industry, getting the fans re-engaged. I think we do have a championship battle between those two.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens down the stretch between Norris and Verstappen. Like you're saying, the 52-point gap right now, not a full. Maybe Red Bull shouldn't go into full panic mode now, but if Coda ends up being one of the worst races that they've had in Lando against max points, then maybe you start pulling the fire alarm and wondering like what's going on. Like, can we hold on and win this championship? But I do agree that moving forward, Oscar Piastri, if he's in position to win a race, Lando Norris moving in second. Like, guys, don't even get upset about the team orders because it's coming. Because I need Lando to get max points, and they need to make sure they're giving Norris the best chance he can have to win this drivers' championship. And like I've already said, I still can't believe we're in this position that we could see quite an exciting championship battle heading down the stretch. Basically, all Max Verstappen needs to do is remain consistent the rest of the year, finish on a podium every race, and it should be good. That sounds very straightforward, right? But as we've seen, in the second half of the season, the Red Bull has really fallen off a lot. So finish on the podium every single race is not a guarantee for Red Bull anymore, like we've seen. And it's certainly going to be interesting to see how the Red Bull team is going to be able to respond, with this 4-week break we have now coming up. And speaking of that 4-week break we have now, Joe, do you think that favors any team before we get to Coda? I know we just had the summer break, then we had some stretch of races, and now we kind of have, I don't want to say maybe a fall break right after having a summer break. I think some of the teams really need this.
The teams could definitely use this as drivers can, especially back-to-back, quite intense Singapore, Azerbaijan. When it comes to this 4-week break, the teams I think that could really benefit from this is the Ferrari team. They have had success here and there. I think they could really just say, okay, what do we need for the next 6 races, particularly United States, Mexico, back-to-back weekends, have something ideally set for those 2 tracks. The McLaren team, if they continue what they're doing, I think they're going to be really hard to beat. Red Bull, normally I would say yes, but I just feel like they're a little bit so far behind. It almost feels like they're a bit of a mess. I don't know if they're able to really say what steps do we need to do. I think their biggest strength, honestly, is the strategy department. If they could just have solid enough cars for Max Verstappen to try to bring into the podium, then they got the Drivers' Championship wrapped up. And I think that might be the focus now because, unfortunately, Sergio Perez, 10th place finish, not exactly the points he needs to deliver. Who knows what's going to happen to him after the Mexico City race weekend. Mercedes, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, this is a team that I feel is very inconsistent, Kobe. It just seems there's some race weekends, they are there to get the win, podium, and then there's some races, they're clearly the 3rd or the 4th best car. Where McLaren is clearly, I think, the 1st best car and, going for those wins. Maybe Ferrari up there too. Not Mercedes. It just seems so inconsistent, that team. They could really benefit, but I just think really when it comes down to this, I'm looking at McLaren. They're going to step it up. Ferrari, I think, are the best two to really excel during this 4-week break.
Yeah, I got that 4-week break, and then we got 6 more race weekends to go. Yeah, looking forward to seeing the 2 races we have in the United States at Circuit of the Americas, and then Las Vegas, and then we have Mexico City, Brazil, and then finish out the year racing in the Middle East. Yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing how this championship battle is going to conclude. But I think Red Bull is probably the team that needs this break more than anything to try to regroup and try to hit on something for this final stretch so they can keep this drivers' championship with Max Verstappen. I think it'll be a lot harder to keep the constructors' championship, from McLaren than losing the drivers' championship. Still think the ball is in Max court here, but we'll have to wait and see what they do down the stretch. And that concludes our talk on F1 today. And now, Joe, I'll turn over to you as you recap the Bristol night race.
NASCAR Cup Series, the Bristol night race, ending the first round, the round of 16 for the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. And this is something we said before. Unfortunately for Kyle Larson, he put a lot of fans probably to sleep a little bit. He dominated this race. led over 460 laps. And when you look at Hendrick Motorsports with Alex Bowman, they led almost every lap. The only other drivers to lead a lap were Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick. Nothing was stopping Kyle Larson that night. Only a mistake, a mechanical issue. But overall, Kyle Larson, he has shown that when it comes to some certain tracks, especially this track at Bristol, the tracks where it's not so much out of control, like a super speedway, a road course where he has a mid qualifying effort, he's going through the pack. If he's up towards the front, he is dangerous. He's going to go out there, get that win. And I think this was a big statement by Hendrick Motorsports. They've been quiet during this first round of the playoffs. Even when it comes to William Byron, who won the Daytona 500, we thought, okay, this is his year. He's been quiet lately. He said he struggled at Bristol. He still advanced, but I think Hendrick Motorsports has to be one of the teams you're looking at. And Alex Bowman, what can I say about him in this first round? What an effort. Solid first round effort, got the pole, led laps. My opinion, Kansas Speedway, Alex Bowman, nobody's in exactly a must-win situation. But if Alex Bowman could get a win at Kansas Speedway, he is going to do himself a big favor and position himself to be in a really good spot to claim a spot in the championship for it, because he will just then focus on the round of 8. You don't have to stress out about Talladega, the Roval. Alex Bowman, he's running good. I think he has a potential for an upset win, and that'll be a huge effort for him. And just continue that winning streak for Hendrick Motorsports. In the chat room, Kyle Larson has a very good chance to win the championship this year. He's one of the top 2 drivers when it comes to the NASCAR Cup Series. Of course, he's going to be one of the drivers to watch. One of the things I think a lot of people were watching for yesterday and were surprised it did not happen, the tire fall off. We saw what happened in springtime. Now, as I said on Saturday's show, I did not anticipate every 50 laps the tires were just going to drop and we'll have cars pit in, maybe a caution. I thought, okay, we'll see what happens 60, 70 laps into a run. Well, we got to 80, 90 laps into a run. It's like, these tires are not dropping off. 100 laps into the run. Okay, tire fall off is not going to happen in this race. That, I think, really threw off a lot of teams, especially some of the teams that struggled. Daniel Suarez, Brad Keselowski, they were towards the back of the pack. When you don't have tire fall off, you don't have those opportunities to come down to pit road quite frequently to change the tires, make adjustments to the car. We had very few cautions in this race. You count the 2-stage cautions, then you had a caution, essentially another 3 caution. Logano had an incident. John Hunter Nemechek had an incident. Corey LaJoie had an incident. That was it. We still had over 30 cars running, which we predicted on Saturday's show. But without the tire fall off, you had a hard night if your car was off. Very few opportunities to make it better. You win a lap down, in case of Dan Suarez, 3 laps down. That was a rough night for a lot of people. And I think the main thing was, if you did not prepare yourself to have a solid enough car, thinking we're going to have the opportunities to make the car better, tire wear off will be a factor. That did not happen. I think this really shows another issue, and that is this car and the struggles of the short track package. This is not the first time we had a short track that didn't live up to the hype, which is generation of car. We know NASCAR has done what they can to make this car better on the short track so we can have some better racing. It's interesting I say better racing, though, because when you look at some of the races, particularly where they have long green flag runs, some people say, well, this is a little bit better. We're having green flag runs. We're having sometimes green flag pit stops. We don't necessarily have the chaos you will see with multiple restarts bringing more cautions, multiple overtimes. But I got to be honest, when it comes to Bristol especially, if you talk to a fan of Bristol Motor Speedway pre-2007, the character of the track was a beat and bang, push the driver out of the way because the only groove was the bottom groove. Ever since they said, oh, we're getting rid of progressive banking, it's going to be the old Bristol, it's been this odd hybrid Bristol where you get the high lane coming in, and then everyone's trying to run the high lane. And we've had moments where we've had good races occasionally here and there, some memories. Everyone remembers Kevin Harvick, Chase Elliott, the drama of that year, some of the hot tempers. But it's just not the same. And this one, I think, is just one of those races where really NASCAR, Goodyear has to say, how can we improve the show at this track? Because if you came to the spring race and you saw what you saw with the tire just falling off every 50 laps and multiple pit stops and all sorts of chaos, you were pretty let down by the show we had on Saturday. And this was one of the big races for NASCAR. It's not exactly a crown jewel race, but this is a race where, for a lot of people, memories of this is the end of the summer. This is a race of memories like Dale Earnhardt versus Terry Labonte, Dale Jr. coined the term as Bristol Baby, the bump and run, the mayhem, the crashes. You didn't get none of that. You got a different product. Some people may not be a huge fan of, and there's going to be some folks that, hey, this was a good race. We didn't have the craziness of multiple overtimes. We didn't have the ridiculousness of a restart back to caution, restart back to caution. But overall, I think Goodyear and NASCAR, especially for the people that want something like the old Bristol, they got to do something. Whether it's bringing that option tire and saying, okay, everyone, you got to run the 2 tire compounds. That could throw in a new wrinkle. Imagine Brad Keselowski, that last pit stop, decided, I'm going to throw in the prime tire if I still have a shot at getting positions. He'll be faster than a lot of those drivers that are in quite old tires. Been interesting to see how a driver like Daniel Suarez, Ty Gibbs would have responded if they had that. Because at the end of the day, the strategy was limited. The passing was hard. You had essentially multiple grooves to just get around. But as we saw with Joe Gibbs Racing 2, the dirty air, if you're towards the front, you're solid. But you fell in the back, very likely you were going to stay in the back, and that's what happened to Joe Gibbs Racing drivers of Martin Truex Jr. and Ty Gibbs. Both of them top 5, top 10s, looking good. I was starting to wonder if they were going to prove me wrong. I said, very likely there's no way Joe Gibbs Racing is going to get all 4 drivers out of the cut line and into the next round. For a while, it looked like you were going to have Briscoe, Suarez, Keselowski, and Burton being the ones eliminated. But Joe Gibbs Racing, those 2 drivers, unfortunately, took themselves out with mistakes. I'll start with Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs, speeding on pit road. Now, Ty Gibbs has had a solid year. His second year full-time racing in the Cup Series. Last year was a rookie year. He had some close opportunities to get a win. Atlanta sticks out, but then just the wrong move, fell out of the top 10. Proves how important every single point and getting that win is. If he had gotten that win in Atlanta, much different story. Not the case. He is out. I think this is just one of those deals you got to say, as a second-year driver, we made the playoffs. We know where we missed the opportunities. Let's keep building ourselves for the rest of this year, going for those wins, because nothing else really matters, and get ready to start 2025 strong. That is not the case, though, for Martin Truex Jr. Martin Truex Jr. made a mistake speeding on pit road. That took him from the top 5 all the way back to 24th, and he apologized to the team. But unfortunately, this is something where, with Martin Truex Jr., that 19 team, they have been not good at all. And I feel this is not a case of a driver making a rare mistake and putting himself out of contention. We have seen this team, where as the team, the driver, be in positions where they should have not been, get in trouble, and fall out. His record of finishes outside the top 20 is very long. And when he fell out, when they said he got his penalty, my first thought was, he's done. I don't see him climbing enough positions to get out. Sure enough, that was the case. I just think this team, they are just looking forward to ending this year. Now they could go out there and say, well, let's just go for the wins. Try to put everything together. Bring at least one more win to Martin Truex Jr. They should use that as motivation. I just don't know if they have it. It just seems like a mistake from the team, a mistake from Martin Truex Jr. will lead to a poor result. And really, that team is probably looking forward to next year when Chase Briscoe, the driver that's going to be in that car, is still contending for a playoff seat. It's going to be really interesting to see how this shakes up. One of the things as we started this round, I had predicted Truex was going to be eliminated. Harrison Burton was on my list as well too. The other two drivers that proved me wrong though, Alex Bowman, he made it out. I thought he was going to be the surprise elimination. And Austin Cindric, those two I thought they were not going to make it. But Austin Cindric, credit to him and Bowman both. Strong first round performances. They're looking really good. Saturday, when we previewed the Kansas race, we'll again try to predict which four drivers will be eliminated. But overall, the Bristol night race, the playoff drama, I think is what really saved the show. If this was not a playoff cutoff race, if this was still earlier towards the end of August, early September, before Labor Day, I think people will still be a little bit more let down by how this race played out, because at the end of the day, this was not the race we anticipated. But for Kyle Larson, he has to feel overjoyed. Such a dominant win and down momentum going to Kansas next race weekend. He has to feel pretty good considering he won last time there. Granted, the closest finish in NASCAR. Christopher Buescher is going to be going for a win. I can't wait to see those two fighting for a race win again. And we got a lot more races coming up for the rest of 2024 because we got to recap MotoGP and the grid ranking.
Yes, that's right, Joe. MotoGP shook up the grid ranking with the wild race. I saw Pecco Bagnaia crash out again while trying to keep up with Jorge Martin. Martin lost the lead on the last lap to Enea Bastianini, who ended up winning the race. Yeah, so wild times in the MotoGP world. Martin leads the MotoGP standings, but he's still behind Pecco Bagnaia, who continues to lead the ranking. But his score is only 17.15, a very low score for grid ranking standard. The lowest scoring champion was in 2017. Martin Truex Jr.'s final score was 17.20. So we'll see if we can get any lower than that. I guess, like, how low can you go, right? Joe, with the lower scores across the grid ranking, does it indicate we're not seeing any dominant driver or rider like we had in past years? It seems like we're seeing a whole bunch of parity across the board, which is extremely rare for the grid ranking.
It is. This is something very interesting and very exciting because last year, Max Verstappen led this from start to finish, just dominated it. Now, we're 14 races into the MotoGP season. Pecco Bagnaia, we started out with 7 wins, looking unbeatable. Now he's looking like the Pecco Bagnaia we are now become to know as, this is Pecco Bagnaia. He's going to win it or crash it. He crashed it again. His score is really low. And when you look at MotoGP compared to the past, Jorge Martin could win. Marc Marquez has been getting wins. He had a good weekend. You look at Formula One. That is coming more unpredictable. Different winners this year. The 2 McLarens, the 2 Ferraris, the 2 Mercedes, 1 Red Bull. They're essentially seeing more parity. You look at NASCAR. Still, if they have more consistency, especially Tyler Reddick, Kyle Larson, they could be up higher. And then let's throw in the wildest one, I think, of them all, World Rally Championship, Cody, where a full-time driver has only won 3 times this year. 2 with Terra Neuville, 1 with Autonic. Everything else has been won by a part-time driver, Sebastien Bourdais, who still finds himself in 10th place. So this really is showing that this year you are not seeing one team just clearly dominate everything in that one respective series. This is something where it's going to be really interesting to see how this turns out, because like you say, Pecco Bagnaia's score, it could still keep going, dropping lower and lower and lower. And mathematically, Tyler Reddick, Kyle Larson, they still got a shot at this grid ranking world championship.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's very rare to see the moment that we're seeing right now, looking at the grid ranking, because it's extremely rare that you see, competitive, racing all across the board. It may be the most competitive season that we've ever had in the history of the grid ranking in motorsport, which is really a great thing to see. Like you say, Joe, usually we see one driver or rider run away with this grid ranking, and maybe we'll have two or three who are in contention towards the end, but it's usually, one driver / rider who has one hand on the grid ranking world championship. But right now, it's basically anyone's game. There's no telling who's going to win. I think that makes it very exciting. Hopefully, the grid ranking will go down, to the very end into November, or maybe into early December, depending on when all these racing seasons end. But really looking forward to seeing how the grid ranking ends. And once we're done with the racing season here in the year 2024, and taking a look at the rest of the grid rank, and IndyCar and Formula E are done for the year. So those scores that you see beside IndyCar drivers and Formula E drivers, those scores are not going to change at all, but their positions could still change as we have more races based on the series who are still completing their seasons. MotoGP has 6 races remaining, including 6 sprint races. Formula One has 6 races, including a couple of sprints mixed in there. Supercars have 5 races to go. Got 2 races on the Gold Coast, 2 in Adelaide, and the next one is the Great Race, the Bathurst 1000, makes 5. World Rally Championship got 3 rallies left, and then NASCAR has 7 races to go in their 2024 season. How many drivers and riders do you think have a realistic chance at winning the grid ranking world championship, Joe?
I'm looking at about 7, maybe 8, most of them in the top 10. Because when you look at the MotoGP riders, especially the ones in the top 10, they just need to start winning the races, the sprint races, and they could climb the standings up to the lead. I mean, Pecco Bagnaia, Jorge Martin, Nea Bastianini, they all got a chance, but let's not count out Marc Marquez, who's right there in 8th place. He got a couple wins already, so potentially he could get the job done. When it comes to Australian supercars, Will Brown, he has very few races to go, but he could easily win the Bathurst 1000. I think he's easily the favorite entering that race weekend. Then you have 4 more races afterwards. 2 race weekends. I think he could easily get another 3 wins, get the lead, especially if Pecco, Jorge Martin do not score the points. So that puts us at 5. Let's not count out Max Verstappen. If somehow he is able to pull off wins here and there, he can still climb up. The one thing that makes it a little hard with Formula One is the lack of field competition. There's only 20 cars in the field. In the grid ranking, the bigger the field, the more points per win. That's why in NASCAR, you still have Tyler Reddick and Kyle Larson. They got enough wins where if they were to just go out there and get multiple wins, they could still find themselves out there. I think that's a little bit of a harder route. But the last driver I'll throw out there, I think, has the opportunity and will be a surprise. Sebastien Bourdais. He is doing the rest of the World Rally Championship season, so he could be a spoiler. Get this grid ranking world championship, and we've never had a part-time driver do that before.
Yeah, and usually when we have things we didn't expect happen, they're usually a rule change. So, Joe, I wonder if Sebastien Bourdais, for some reason, wins this grid ranking world championship as a part-time driver at these rallies. I wonder if we're going to see a change in the grid ranking in 2025 moving forward. Are we going to see a part-timer, part-timers becoming eligible to be in the grid ranking? But if it was up to me, and it's not up to me, I say, why not just leave them in? Because this is probably just a rare occurrence that we'll probably never see again. I think we'll probably have an asterisk that, next to this year, that if Bourdais were to win this grid ranking, that would probably be something, just a one-time thing, because it's just been such an odd year in World Rally Championship. And then again, it would be really hilarious if you end up winning the World Rally Championship as well as a part-timer, which would be insane. But yeah, we still have a handful of drivers and riders who can win this grid rank and world championship. I'm looking forward to seeing how it concludes at the end of the season. Yeah, at the end of the season, I believe will be done in early December this year, Joe, if I'm not correctly. But the 2025 grid rank and world championship season begins, shortly after that. I believe like a week after the final race, because we got Formula E racing, I believe, in Sao Paulo. Is it Sao Paulo, Brazil? In December, right before Christmas. So our 2025 racing season, just starts basically immediately after the current one concludes. So we'll be very busy heading into the, I guess, I'm gonna call it the so-called off season, because honestly, given the schedules that we have, at the end of this year and then the next year, we really don't have an off season here at Grid Network. It's basically motorsports year round.
Motorsports year round, because then December Formula E starts up, January Rolex 24 hours, IMSA, that's World Endurance Performance Index. Here we go again. We're next thing you know in February, March, April, and May. With that said, though, let's go back to just this race weekend, not think about the big picture. Kobe, what's your one shining moment from this weekend?
The Carolina Panthers winning a football game. We finally won a game, and after I get off here, I'm going to go party and celebrate like we just won the Super Bowl, because it's been a long time since we've had a win quite like this. So it's definitely very special for all us Carolina Panther fans out there to get a big win today over the Las Vegas Raiders. But in all seriousness, from this racing weekend on the actual track, not on the football field, I got to give a call to Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan Racing, the whole BMW program. Even with that, what happened to them on Wednesday, this, like I said, towards the beginning of the show, it's been a very difficult year for BMW, Team RLL on the IMSA side of things. It's been a year of ups and downs, mostly downs, being inconsistent, not being able to keep up with their competitors in the GTP class, and to come out with a 1-2 finish on a day when probably nobody picked them to win, in our pick a winner game. Yeah, I think it was really good for them to come out and get that 1-2 win, try to, build some momentum in the Petit Le Mans end of the year on a high note and go into next year, ready to come out of the gate strong at the Rolex 24 at Daytona. I feel like that this was just a much needed win for Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan's Racing Sports Car program, which has really struggled this year, and especially for the team as a whole, as they continue, to go through the situation with whatever happened last Wednesday with the FBI. So definitely a good way to end the turbulent week for Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan Racing.
Great way for them to end that weekend. Adam, one shiny Motor Racing Network. Kids already singing the anthem. Plus, congrats to Portland, Oregon for getting a WNBA franchise. Very exciting for that. Very excited for you, Kobe. See your Panthers get a win. I know that's a struggle. For me, my shiny moment, it's going to come over from Formula One. And this is going out to Lando Norris, that McLaren team. Because what we saw from them was really what a lot of people have been anticipating they can do. Go out there, control the race weekend from start to finish. Pole, lead every lap. They had the fastest lap pretty much for the race until Daniel Ricciardo made that last move, which could be very critical in the championship. Lando Norris, for quite some time, he has been seen as, okay, he's the new young guy here at McLaren. He's popular. He has the fan engagement, but can he go out there and really get the win? We know how painfully close he was in Russia a few years ago, where had he stopped, he probably would have gotten at least a podium, maybe that win still, but it slipped out. This year, he is finally, after the Miami race, showing he can go out there, get a win, not because of the timing of the safety car in Miami, not because of the way just things work out with strategy, but he could just go out there, dominate, and really race with the best. Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, all of them, and get a win. I think he has a lot of potential. It's going to be really interesting to see what he does. And for the McLaren team, they get my shining moment. There'll be more shining moments tomorrow on Grid Encore. They're going to be recapping the full race weekend at Bristol from the Xfinity Series, the Truck Series. I don't know if the ARCA Series is going to produce a shining moment from Ben, but overall, they're going to be recapping all those races, and Kobe will be on the air Wednesday. Grid tonight. Matt's going to be there for the Grid Endurance Performance Index. Thursday, Friday, women in motorsports. And we'll do this all over again next weekend with Grid Live pre-race and a wrap-up. We got a lot of racing next weekend. We still have NASCAR Cup Series. Their playoff runs will continue. MotoGP and Royal Rally Championship, they'll be racing. So be sure, pick a winner on Wednesday. Don't miss out. For Kobe Lambeth, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.